So at our Breaking Bread events, we facilitate discussions always over food because they're going to be hard discussions, and it's easier to have these hard discussions over food. It was Waylon who started conversation about breaking bread on the road, taking two groups of people that might not otherwise share meals together and get to know names and stories. And those two groups were law enforcement and members of the Black community.
My name is Tim Dorsey. I'm Deputy Chief at the Edmond Police Department.
Quentin Hughes Sr. My job title is Executive Director, Northeast OKC Renaissance.
It was a great experience for me, like coming into my third year in college.
When this opportunity was presented to me, I was extremely excited to be a part of it.
My name is Kendrick Adams. I work for Pratt & Whitney as the Senior Facilities Manager.
My name is Sid Porter. I'm retired police chief of the Midwest City Police Department.
What sticks out to me the most is realizing these people would be longtime friends.
I'm Michelle Henderson. I've been a police officer for 25 years with Oklahoma City Police Department.
From my purview and working across different communities in the city, we're primed and ready to be able to own the process of having these conversations.
We took a specially selected group of people and we set out a very intentional agenda to explore D.C. and America's history, to do it together and hope that really good conversations would happen that would unpack some really difficult things. But I invited Derek because Derek is the creator of experiences. He is the connector.
How do we break down walls quickly and get them to connect? What I find the best way to do that is if you get people playing.
We had a whole lot of things that happened before we got on the plane to help people engage with one another.
Myself and Julius Singer, JC, went along fully as the documenting crew. We had cameras, both of us.
So I was trying to capture just the relationships that all the individuals had with one another. It was really interesting to see the relationships that started to build.
Because people were paired together as kind of trip or experience partners, they made a point to sit next to each other on the subway or at a restaurant or on the bus, building a relationship just about life.
We placed a high premium on conversations. We paired everybody up. We were in hopes that the conversation would never stop.
We had the difficult conversations that needed to be had.
We talked about Black history. We talked about racial relations. I had a lot of different tough conversations.
When we had differing opinions, we just talked about them.
We're getting down to the point. We're having these conversations where
Couldn't wait till the next day to get with everybody and be talking and visiting and
Just hey, don't shy away from any uncomfortable conversations. That's what we're here for.
When you bring two groups together like law enforcement and the Black community, it seems to make some sense to take them places where you would end up touching those open wounds that have something to do with this distance between, and even the tension between these two groups of people.
And to allow whatever conversations come from when they saw Arlington, when they saw the monuments, when they saw all of the history that is in the African American History Museum, when they got to experience the law enforcement museum.
it was a heavy back to back to back. And I think, being in the group that we were in, that it almost helped you to sit a little bit deeper in it, even if you've already been to some of these landmarks.
So recognizing that it's important to touch those open wounds, we went to Arlington National Cemetery.
So going to Arlington Cemetery, I didn't know what to expect. I had never heard of it before. They don't teach that in school anymore.
I'd been many times to Arlington, and just the thought of looking out and, these are soldiers who have died for the country, and kind of what it means as an American, and how just patriotic it made me feel always to be there.
And I'd actually been to Arlington before, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
When I think of Arlington, I think of the changing of the guard, Kennedy's grave, all the monuments and all that.
As a veteran, that's always going to be a very gut-wrenching experience to go to a cemetery like that. But then you dive a little deeper into the history.
I think it was Waylon, hey, we're going up here to this Arlington house. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Well, that completely changed the perspective of the Arlington Cemetery, and to see, this place was actually a plantation.
I was not aware that it was originally a plantation at one time owned by Robert E. Lee.
A lot of people didn't know Arlington Cemetery had slaves there. And, when we got to the top of the hill, we were able to tour the slave cabin.
The most shocking moment for me to just sit in was definitely the slave quarters at the Arlington Cemetery.
And the slave aspect, those are things that I had no idea about.
We walked through the slave quarters. I'm seeing him able to imagine what it looks like, and then he's pointing out to me, look at that, look at that, look at that. I can tell like he's taking it in and like processing it.
A lot of people these days, they don't understand the history or their ancestors and their history, and learning that was like day one. That was like, okay, you better pay attention in this trip because you're going to learn a lot.
And in fact, that's where we saw some of the greatest growth take place on the trip, is when we were having those hard conversations. It's when you see Michelle and JB sitting at Arlington on the back of the house that was built by slaves.
I sat down by JB and to have a conversation with JB, who is completely different than me, and see his perspective was eye-opening.
They've had the opportunity to live a life where those things have never been an issue for them. Those things have never been something that they had to confront or deal with or work through. I don't got that option.
I had thought of Arlington as this sacred ground, and I think it is, but to hear a perspective, I think it was JB that was like, I wouldn't want to be buried here. It's a plantation. And like, oh, but that's reality.
Just seeing that openness, it gave me hope. You know what I'm saying? It gave me hope for people, period.
And so on another day, we went to see the African American History Museum, and we took our time.
From 1492 to present with the African American Museum, it was a lot to take in.
It's massive. You could spend hours or days in there. It was sad. It was depressing at times. It was super informative.
The gravity of us being there together didn't escape me.
We understand that there's very historically a conflict or a dissonance or disagreement between law enforcement and the Black community. And that goes all the way back, right? Hundreds of years here in the United States, right? Before it was the United States, there was a conflict.
There was a time where I thought people wanted to run from that history, or like people didn't want to know that history, or they wanted to ignore it. Now realizing like some people just don't even have a clue.
But once you get in that museum and you get a dive in depth into what African American people had to go through, it's very sombering.
The emotion, I'll never forget. I mean, if that don't hit you in the gut and make you think more.
There was things there that really gut punched me quite a bit. So,
The Emmett Till portion of that always just kind of takes me out. Your throat kind of catches when you think about that.
Going through the African American Museum yesterday, once I got back to my room last night, I watched a 2-hour documentary on Emmett Till. I had to know more. I had to learn more. So it's been very humbling, a very eye-opening experience.
Next morning, he's like, I watched a 2-hour documentary. I was like, oh, wow, he's willing to do the work to understand.
Being present and the fact that we were all going through it together, you really wanted to do justice by that.
And to watch them react to the museum was, wow. Kind of put that together, where I don't know that I ever would have before, just going to the museum with the people who look like me and don't have the same experiences.
We're all here to learn, and you learn from each other.
Specifically, just being at the museums, just for most people, it's just a movie. When it come on TV, you laugh, you cry. When it go back off, you go to your life. You know what I'm saying? But for me, like, it's not a movie. That's something I have to live with and deal with every single day.
This history has created passionate animosity due to the role of law enforcement, which makes the job more dangerous, right? And for them. And so
I think that helped me quite a bit, getting to understand why there's a backlash with police. If you don't understand that why, then we can never correct it, right?
That latent anger is very much contributing to the fear of a white police officer that has to come here and police a community that they feel like hates them. At the same time, if you're a community member, it's hard for me to expect for them to not be scared.
So we also went to the Law Enforcement Museum.
All of the history that is there and the history of law enforcement and the purpose and the heart behind that profession.
We did do some things that helped us kind of see through the lens of the officers and like their current realities.
We got to go through the simulator with some shoot, don't shoot decision making.
Drop the hammer. I need you to put the hammer down. Put the hammer down.
Put the gun down now.
Stop moving.
Put the gun down now. Shoot.
It became apparent that perhaps we don't appreciate all that goes into the snap decisions that law enforcement have to make when they're in a position to protect not only their own lives, but our lives as well.
Yeah, it allows you to empathize with them on if they're responding. In some cases, they're not responding based on color. They're responding based on like these facts in this situation. And at the same time, you can't negate the biases that have, that have formed and accumulated over centuries.
And then we had more serious, more intentional conversations about what we had seen that day. We had 2 breaking bread events, 2 different evenings.
It was a good experience. Like, I love the breaking bread dinners.
But those dinners, though, I think did allow us to kind of make group connections.
When you get together with somebody that's different than you and you're willing to listen, you learn things and like opens your mind up.
I'm looking around and I'm seeing the history through kind of different eyes than I've seen before because I have all of these different conversations going on.
Those dinners, everything was already laid out on the table, so then we just had to open our mouths and speak to it.
I'm just trying to figure out why it keep happening to our community.
They were speaking from the heart. Sometimes there's a time to speak and sometimes there's a time to listen.
Today was important because we have to figure out a good way to collaborate.
We're getting down to the point. We're having these conversations where, so much of the content that we actually needed to talk about really kind of came up because everybody approached the seriousness of these opportunities and finding these connections.
Like, this is great for us to see and be here, but we gotta, change back home.
This morning, we met with our Senator James Lankford. We talked a little bit about race and reconciliation and how that connects to our group.
So all of you working towards reconciliation and conversation on that, thank you. So for all of you gutsy enough to be able to block off your time, to be able to have the hard conversations, to do what I call peacemaking, not peacekeeping. Peacekeeping is everybody calm down. Peacemaking is you sit down, let's figure this out.
I was encouraged. We're not the only ones who think this, that we are better when we sit down together, when we share a meal to one another. And it was good to hear Senator Lankford say these same things.
Being in close proximity to Senator Lankford, I now understand, he's a good man. To see his spirit light up when we talked about diversity.
Oklahoma should set the pace for the rest of the country. We're the ones with Clara Libre. We're the ones with the 1921 race massacre. We're the ones that can actually set the tone for the rest of the country and say we know how to be able to do this. So everybody that's actually in the work of peacemaking, thanks. I mean it.
Right now, it seems like some of the loudest voices in our culture have a vested interest in us being divided. But at the end of that cycle, typically you have violence and you have the fracture of a culture. And while we need good policy, I'm not convinced that you can merely legislate your way out of that division and that potential violence. You can't punish your way to peace.
As they say, love conquers all. Love is one of those things where you have to be in close proximity.
We really got really close. I love them all and think of them as brothers and sisters.
What ended up happening was relationships formed, and relationships protected the conversations.
We made friendships. We were just being friends. It was just amazing.
But when you have a relationship, build a little trust, get some friendship, then you're like, oh, I'm not offended by it. Tell me how you see it. So
this trip will be as successful as the staying power of the friendships that were formed during the trip.
This trip showed me that a lot could be possible.
Man, if we could really own this, I think it could be a model or a pilot for other places to be able to do it.
I hope it starts other conversations, similar conversations in other parts of the community.
I had conversations like that with people like, when I come back, I want to talk to this person. I got to talk to my friend over here. Like, those things gave me hope.
And to me, that's my goal every day, is to bring this to anybody that will listen to me.
It's hard to imagine how far-reaching that could be.
Ah.